virtually will be allowed to make comments if they wish to do so during the portion of the hearing designated for public comment by telephone, cell phone, or personal computer using Zoom. As usual, our guidelines for participants are that you must utilize the chat or raise hand function if you wish to address the board. You're going to be asked to remain on mute until you are actually addressed by the board, and that you're required to display your first and last name as your username on your Zoom account. With all that said, per tradition, we will start with a roll call. I am Brian Barabee.
Laurie Stevenson.
Bill Payne.
And Jim Garrity.
Excellent. All right, Rebecca.
Rebecca Bachaya.
Yeah.
I will pull up the first item, Brian, since it's not a public hearing item. And we do have Jillian and Nathaniel Stevens with us this evening. Again, I know our commission members at least met them at the last meeting. That was a joint meeting with Clinton. So let me share.
Yeah.
All right. So again, this evening is more of a continuation and further discussion with the commission, specifically talking about climate smart bylaw regulations and provisions from our Nashua River Communities Resilient Lands Management Project. Again, a joint project with Clinton and Bolton and funded through the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program from the Office of the EEA. If Jillian and Nathaniel want to take it from there.
Thanks. Good evening, everyone. I think Jillian's connecting as well.
Yep. Thanks, everyone. Yep, I had to unmute there for a minute. Yeah, it's nice to be back with you. And we know we only have 20 minutes, so we kind of want to be efficient. And we thought last time we had to kind of rush through the end of the little outline here. So we thought we'd start at the bottom instead of at the top. But before we do that, just interested in seeing if anybody had any questions or comments from last time, or thoughts or things that you want from having the last week or so to mull it over, things that you want to see included in the bylaw and regs.
And I'll add that Rebecca did forward Jim's nice list of, I'm counting up the items, probably about almost 20 items and comments that he had. He shared that. We have that email, and that we incorporated many of those into the outline you see in front of us. But I guess it would be helpful to know if there are other additional thoughts at this time. Any of the other commission members?
For me, if you want to go through that bottom half, that bottom section quickly first.
Yeah.
I just had some thoughts, but I kind of want to hear what you have to say about that first, quick, if possible.
Okay. Rebecca, could you pop it onto the top of the performance standards section, which is bottom of page 3? So we'll just start with the performance standards. Yeah, so the performance standards are an important part to think about, because that's where you might be asking people to do more to protect, or putting in more restrictions or more requirements. And so some of the, or you may just be changing things. So performance standards in the vegetated wetland section, one recommendation that we have is that you allow modification of delineation methodology during drought or abnormally dry conditions or the dry season, because one thing that we see in the field is the herbaceous layer can shift from being predominantly hydric species to being predominantly upland species if the conditions get dry. Now, obviously the trees and the shrubs won't make that shift in a single drought or a single dry season. And so there's, we can propose some language for that, but that gives delineators the flexibility to sort of discount the herbaceous layer a bit, because it may be predominantly upland species just due to those drier conditions. Another thing is to think about climate-related replication standards, where you might increase the replication ratio, or there's you can read about it in detail in the actual regulations section, but there's a method of translocating impacted area soils and shrubs together that can help protect soil carbon and other soil functions. And you can also reduce the amount of square footage that can be impacted below the state 5,000 square footage. So some communities say, instead of having that 5,000 square foot threshold, they bring it down to like 2,500 feet. And you can use the climate and biodiversity interests as a reason to justify that. For instance, protecting the enhanced need to protect soil carbon would be a good one. And you can consider allowing restoration of some types of degraded wetlands as part of the mitigation package, maybe not completely substituting for replication, but and then Rebecca, can you scroll down? Yellow highlighting, these are the comments from Jim that we added in here, and so we just wanted to hear what other people thought too, and if everybody likes those, then we can go with these things. So things like requiring more than 2-to-1 replacement for trees removed from new development sites, banning synthetic fertilizers and pesticides within jurisdictional areas, banning irrigation systems within jurisdictional areas, and you can add watering and maintenance requirements with timeframes, and performance standards. You can put in performance standards for the aura. You can have no disturb and no build zones, which we did sort of discuss that up more in the jurisdiction section, I think. You could,
I just add there is there, you all will see that we listed several. There was mention of 25 foot, 30 and 35 feet. So that's something that the commission should come to consensus on, and then we can work that into a draft. But that's highlighted above, I think, on page 1 or 2.
Yeah. And for instance, I think Jim, you'd said you were fine with going to a 30 to 35 foot no disturb zone. So the commission, it'd be great if you all could tell us exactly what you want it to be.
Or give us a single number. Yes, that's what we're trying to say. Yeah,
30 or 35 or
right. Yeah.
And with bordering land subject to flooding, you could increase the compensatory flood storage requirements. And again, going to the definition that we talked about last time of either the best available modeling or 500 year. You could prohibit structures in land subject to flooding. And then for stormwater, there's several things listed here. Again, using NOAA 14++ data would be much more up to date, certainly than TP40 and even than the Cornell numbers, and also using the Massachusetts RMAT tool. And we can put in or best available, because that will allow you, say something comes along that's better than NOAA 14++, if you say or best available, that will allow you to just use the most up-to-date thing instead of having to go back and revise your bylaw and regs to say whatever the latest data set is. You can say, you can require no increase in the total volume of stormwater from a new development, and not just have the requirement about the rate of stormwater. You can require complying with TMDLs, which TMDL is total maximum daily load, so of sediment and contaminants and things like that.
Right, and those are usually set by by water body. So you may have a water body in town that has a TMDL that's been established for it, or a river or a watershed that has TMDLs established
Mhm.
through the Clean Water Act. So that may or may
Yes.
not apply in Bolton. We don't know, but that's something
Right.
that DEP is promising, that their revised stormwater standards, standard number 11, will actually require compliance with TMDLs, since some communities have TMDLs and wonder how the DEP stormwater standards interact, and that will answer that question.
Mm. Yeah, and then there's a couple of definitions that can be included. You could also require smaller projects, including single-family homes, to meet stormwater standards to the extent practicable. So you give them a little bit of flexibility, but they need to try to reduce their impervious surface, that sort of thing. And you might want to match or exceed MS4 requirements and restrict conversion of natural cover to lawns and landscaping. Can you scroll down? Yeah. And incentivize, you could create some incentives for converting lawns and landscaping to natural cover, especially to pollinator meadows and forests and trees. And then we discussed last time, there was interest in adding the waiver process to your regs. And for that, we would probably just take the boilerplate language from the MACC model bylaw. And so that is the performance, that's just sort of some of the highlights for performance standards. Anybody have any thoughts on those?
Sure, I'll try to start. Excuse me. Sorry. But I guess starting with the top, the adding to the no touch zone off of the wetlands. I'll put it to other commission members. I could see us trying to go to 30. I don't know if that one's going to be a difficult sell to the town. Everything we've done the last X amount of years, we've always based off the 25. I could see us trying to move that to the 30 for the aura, but I was also curious if we could put in additional expansion for riverfront areas. I know when we did the Nissitissit, Squanicut, Nashua, they were looking for larger buffer zones to riverfront areas. And I'm wondering if we could do something like
Yes.
the wetlands to 30 and then the riverfronts to maybe 40 or 35, something along those lines. But I'll ask other commission members their thoughts on numbers for those two. I liked your comments about performance standards during droughts, making that switch so that we can kind of look at things a little bit different during a drought situation. I was curious, Rebecca, if you can go down to section 4 and then subsection B and then D. Oh, yeah. For restoration of degraded wetlands, I'm just curious why it said not invasive species management or species treatment.
Consider.
I think,
Oh, okay.
go ahead,
That,
Jillian.
like, we wouldn't, yeah, what that means is restoration, such as removing fill or dam removal, something really substantial.
Yeah.
But invasive species treatment, to me, doesn't cut the mustard. It could be part of a mitigation package, but it wouldn't substitute, for instance, for the square
Cool.
footage of wetland creation, because it's, as you know, an ongoing battle. You could do it for a few years and then the invasives could come back. So the permanency of it isn't guaranteed at all. Whereas if you
Okay.
pull fill out or remove a dam, that is a permanent restoration.
Restoration to that area.
Yeah, so I
Um,
was drawing that distinction. It's just, it doesn't have the permanency.
Okay.
But please,
Um,
you could definitely add it as an extra requirement.
And like you said, well, it's still something we can consider, but yeah,
Yeah.
to limit that it wouldn't be the full extent is perfectly fine, I think.
Yeah.
All right, so if Rebecca, if you go down to the next section C, I think I agreed with just about everything that was the section. I had a number of things highlighted. I think I like all of the language there. I think I would be in favor of all that. Stormwater always kind of throws me for a loop relatively. We had the idea for you had written the idea of adding green infrastructure into definitions. I'd be curious if we were able to do that. I'm just curious on some certain projects, if it's something we can suggest or point people towards.
Yeah.
Like the idea of adding that. I'm just going through. The concept of and I'm not sure what we could start with or what the town would agree to, but incentives for regrowth, regreening of certain areas. I think that would be great if we could somehow figure what those incentives might be, even if they were temporary, for the next 2-3 years, something like that. But I'd be curious if we could do something along those lines. I had written down, but I guess thinking it through, it's not really necessary, but to build something in, especially when it came to like those the buffer zones and the no touch areas, that it's something that, the commission would basically resubmit or submit to the town at town meeting, new standards every 3 years or something along those lines. So it puts us, according to our bylaws, it puts us on a schedule of when we should be coming before town meeting and asking for changes to the bylaws or changes to certain parts of the bylaws. But we can really manage that on our own, and it's probably better not to lock ourselves into it.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was jotting things down throughout the week and I'm just kind of going through. And the last one I had is I'm still curious if we can add something about education, just something that says whenever the town is notified about a change of ownership of a deed or a change of a deed, that person receives the registered letter that informs them, just so you know, you have wetlands on your property. They're governed by Mass General Law, Chapter 131 and Town Bylaw 233. And here's where you can find out more information about that. And if you have questions, here's the email for the town department. I'd love to put something like that in. I really think that would help us along the ways, because I know some people that, they're ecologically conscious. They just don't know what having wetlands on their property actually means.
Nathaniel, do you want to?
Sure. Yeah, it's a tough one. And one way we deal with this in my town, and it's not the best way, is that we have the building department sort of act as a screen. I mean, I know that's a little bit late in the process because sometimes not everything requires a building permit. The other thing, I don't know if your town has the capability, but we have a GIS system set up which specifically maps the floodplains, estimated floodplains and resource areas and their buffer zones in town, so someone can use that. And that's one way of just determining sort of as a quick look-see to see if you're within, you probably need to apply to the Conservation Commission. The only thing I can really think of that be more, more assuring is that require the town clerk to send a notice when they're notified or they discover the property has changed hands, which they're often the first one to do since they want to know who the tax bill goes to, right?
Right.
That they be required to send some sort of note, but someone would have to tell them which properties in town are subject to the Conservation Commission's jurisdiction. So it may be difficult unless they send a letter saying, please check this resource, in on the town website or at town hall to see if your property, your property may be within the commission's jurisdiction or something like that. So it's something to think through. But it's, again, I mentioned this before, it's a perennial problem with many commissions about educating homeowners. And I think that it's not even just sending a certified mail letter, because of course not everyone opens their mail and reads it, but it's a really concerted effort through every opportunity the commission has. If you have a table at a fair, town fair or something like that, and different types of educational materials throughout town to try to educate people in many ways.
Right, yeah, guess that would be probably the best we could do.
Yeah,
But
no, it's hard.
so
Right. It's-
I think
think-
it's worth though putting some sort of language in about education or notifying the public, whether it be specific to a new landowner or not, whatever that verbiage may be. And maybe that's something we just leave as a note, or we meaning our MVP team here, come up with some sort of statement about that. And then of course we can take it further with our council at a later date. And that may give me time as well to speak internally with the different departments like the town clerk or the tax collector or the assessor and figure out who would get notified. Would that be something that's more appropriate coming from my office with them notifying me, or vice versa? So I think it's definitely worth communicating further about.
Do you guys include any such conditions as a special condition in your orders? I mean, those, that's just another possible way. It's not, again, it's not foolproof, but some
So
conditions
no,
included.
yeah, so in every order of conditions, it talks about any transfer of ownership and how one would approach that. And it requires a deed be sent to the Conservation Commission and then a signed copy of the order of conditions by the new property owner.
Okay, right,
Yeah.
all right.
but I think those are most of my comments. I'm just curious. I want to open up to other members of the commission just to get their thoughts, comments, ideas, just time wise. All right, and I know Jim, you had said some stuff in. Anybody want to make comment at this point?
Hey, Brian, I got one question. This is Bill.
Go ahead, Bill.
So the restriction for, setback from a wetland resource, you're recommending going from 25 to 30 feet? I mean, could we
Yes.
recommend going instead of to 30 feet to 50 feet?
So just one point of clarification, Bill, we're talking about, which the short answer is yes, you can. Just a point of clarification is, so we're talking about the 25-foot no disturb, no build area being extended to 30 feet, where that extended 100-foot adjacent upland or 75-foot adjacent upland resource area is still a regulated area under our bylaw as well. But just one point of clarification, that's all.
If I remember, I thought it was in Concord. They had actually moved theirs 50 feet or something like that.
Yeah,
When we
there
were talking-
definitely are towns that have 50-foot no disturbs. So you can do that if you want to, but you have to
Is it
kind of figure out,
difficult?
will your community support that if it comes to a vote, which is something only you all can answer.
Yeah, so I gotta lean on you, Brian, and
It's a tough
Sure.
one. I mean, I was kind of more going for the vote aspect. That's a big jump relatively in a good way, but I think a lot of people that have existing homes, all of a sudden they might be affected if they go to change something or do something. Now, do they realize that when we're voting on it? I'm not sure. Which is kind of why I was trying to figure out a way to kind of make it so we kind of try to go back to town meeting every few years and take another look at these, but to see if we could exceed, if we could try to bump it by 3, get that through, see if that causes any consternation, and then 3 years from now we're going to 35, and just keep trying to push it a little bit.
okay, I understand.
Could we? Well, here's a question: Could we include wording about new construction?
Yeah.
New building sites that it's a 40-foot buffer zone for new building, or 40-foot no touch for new building, and a 30-foot for existing.
I don't see why not.
Yeah.
Bill, do you
Yeah,
think that might be a decent compromise? I think that's something we might be able to try to get through.
Yeah, and you also wanted 40-foot no disturb in the riverfront area?
I would think so. I think people can
Yeah.
understand, hopefully, and see
Okay.
that one better, and that's affecting less and less homes.
Okay. Yeah, I think you can definitely say 40 feet for new construction and 30 feet for existing sites or existing structures and things.
Right.
And then the other thing we could just, Rebecca, if you could scroll up from the performance standards, we could quickly look at the next section above that, because we didn't, application requirements. These were just a few things we were recommending. Require people to put projected future flood levels and resource area locations on, well, particularly the flood levels, projected flood levels on plans, and require applicant to provide narrative of measures incorporated into the project to address climate resilience, such as avoidance, minimization, and mitigation of any things that about their proposal that's going to make the site less resilient, and requirement of phasing of projects that are over a certain acreage, define requirements for the alternatives analysis, and require that large trees are shown on site plans. Those are all things that could be added.
Yeah, I had, reading through those, I was comfortable with all of those. I was debating whether, do we need to define what a large tree is if we do a
Yeah.
sort of diameter or
Yep.
something like that.
Yeah, and we can put that in the definitions.
But I really like the phasing of projects. We had some projects where they did a lot of clearing and then just didn't touch it for years. Still haven't touched it. So I was comfortable with all of those.
Okay. Rebecca, do you want to scroll up? The yellows are things that Jim had said, yes, we'd like to do this. And so we just want to make sure people are comfortable with these other yellow things.
Sure, and I should open it up to Jim, Lori, and again, Bill, if you have any questions, further comments, thoughts on any of these. All right, not seeing any right now.
And then the other thing is a suggestion to expand riverfront area to 225 feet and to give bordering land subject to flooding a 50-foot aura.
Again, I think I'm comfortable with both of those. The 250 foot, I just wonder if that one will get a lot of pushback on. I'm not sure.
It says 225.
I'm sorry, 225.
Okay.
Yeah, I again, didn't know if I was overreaching here. So yeah, it's a good point, Brian. Not sure if we can.
Yeah,
sell
if you,
I think too, if you're gonna do if you're going to add in a no touch area within the riverfront area,
Yep.
I could see that. Where if you're not doing that, I could see expanding. I mean, I could see all of this, but I'm saying for town meeting and other people and how they approach things.
Right.
I think that
And
makes
again,
more sense.
It's worth us trying to do the 200, 225. And again, it just leaves it as jurisdictional, so we can always work within it if we need to, depending.
so let me just get this straight. So are you saying that because you're adding the 40-foot no disturb in the riverfront, you want to stay at 200 feet and not go to 225? Or do you want to try to do both?
I think I'd say do both.
Okay.
We're saying we're bumping to 225 because we're bumping the no touch by 15, so we're bumping the aura off that by 25.
Okay. Sounds good. Then what we were thinking about as a process is now that we can use this as sort of the base for making the modifications to the bylaws and regs. And we may come upon other things that we might think that you would like to have in there, but we're not sure. So what we'll do is all of these things that are shown on here, we'll kind of, unless you say otherwise, we'll assume everything on this page is something you want us to go forward with. And feel free, if you look at it after this meeting and you're like, whoa, no, we don't want to do some of these things, shoot Rebecca an email and she can forward it to us, to say, don't do, identify whichever one, don't do this one and don't do that one, and that'll be fine. So we'll make those changes and we'll highlight those in green kind of signifying you've green lighted them. And then if we have others in addition, we'll make other changes, in track changes, so you can see, in red text or whatever they do. And we'll send that back to Rebecca and she can share that with you, and you can decide, in addition to the ones that are green lighted that we've all discussed, do you like these other ideas too or not? And give that feedback to Rebecca, and she can let us know, and then we'll eliminate anything you don't want to see happening for a change, and just include whatever you green light. How does that sound as a process going forward?
That sounds like that's a logical way to progress to me. Other commission members have any disagree with that? All right, so again, I would say that is probably the best way to proceed.
Okay, great. And so now we're kind of gonna, Nathaniel and I, it's probably gonna take a few weeks before you hear from us again, because we're gonna go through this fairly thoroughly, and it's gonna take some time. But then we'll be back in touch, and we'll be in touch with Rebecca about sort of the timeline for that, and she'll let you know when we're gonna, when we have something ready to share, and then we'll figure out the feedback process, and then we'll give you a clean final version. Well, we'll give you actually two clean final versions: a clean redlined version, like track changes version, so that you can share that with other people, with the town, and say, here's where the changes are. And then one that's totally clean, that, if it all gets approved, you have a nice, super clean.
And I'm going to ask Rebecca quickly, when do we need to submit for any bylaw changes for annual town meeting?
For this town meeting, we probably would not meet the deadline because that's in May.
Yeah.
But certainly if there's a special town meeting in
May.
fall, we would meet that, or the following May.
But usually it's at least a month before, right? I'm trying to think when they need it to get on. Okay.
I do know right now they're starting the budget or they've already started, the budgetary review process. So it comes fairly quickly after that.
Okay. All right.
But that being said, there are other opportunities, and I think that also gives us an opportunity to review with council and the town departments as well as necessary. The other thing I would just note quickly about this particular item on the agenda is I would ask that, I know Jillian said they're going to take a few weeks to review this and really massage it out. But if you could provide any feedback or any other insights now that you've had 2 meetings and some time to go over this information, it would be really helpful if you can provide it before the next meeting, which is February 7th, and or certainly before the 14th. And the reason why is because Clinton then has their meeting on the 15th. So it'd be helpful if we have pretty much all the comments until we get any new information from Jillian and Nathaniel, of course.
Thank you. All right. That said, unless any commission members have any additional comments right now, don't see. Thank you, Jillian and Nathaniel. Appreciate you guys coming on, taking the time tonight.
Yeah, very
look
happy.
forward to seeing what you come up with.
Okay,
Thank you.
great.
Thanks very much.
Nice to see
All
you
right.
all.
Good to see you.
Take care.
Have a
Okay,
good meeting.
bye-bye.
All right, Rebecca, if you are ready to continue,
Yes.
I am too. All right, so the Bolton Conservation Commission will now continue the public hearing under Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, and the Bolton Bylaw, Chapter 233, to consider a notice of intent for 19 Whitcomb Road, DEP file number 112-0723. And just as a quick update, the commission was able to go on a site visit. I know I was able to go on that visit. Basically from my observations, where the whole garage is being proposed, while definitely in resource area, is also on some pretty well-defined existing lawn. Relatively flat, relatively well-defined. And it's, sometimes we'll have people define the limit of work or the border of the yard. Again, it's pretty well defined with the stone wall in this particular situation. There we go. Great. Looking in the field too, we kind of looked at other places you might be able to put the garage or move the septic. And I was looking for a lot of it, like the septic, it was hard to move it to the front because of the existing well. I don't think it would be able to hit the offsets. Sorry, I don't know if you're sliding it over, Rebecca. There was the well. I know we talked about, could the new garage kind of go in the front yard, and there was some size concerns, there were offset concerns. The garage has to be of a certain size basically to function for a business. So I guess my main concern, basically because of where it was going, would be the runoff. It's a pretty significantly sized roof, and trying to find some way to basically direct that runoff into the existing backyard, to have it infiltrate that way rather than going off the backside of the new garage, and causing any rotting as it goes right down into into the resource area, well, further into the resource area, I guess I would say. Those are my initial thoughts and comments. Any other commission members who were on the site visit have thoughts that they would like to share?
Brian, Jillian wasn't able to be here this evening, so if you give me one moment, I will read into the record her comments if you'd like.
Please.
Okay, just bear with me for one moment. It'd help if I unmuted myself. So Jillian's comments were as follows. The current grade of the proposed garage site was a concern because downgrade is towards the wetland resource area. So given the purpose of a garage is to hold vehicles and equipment, concerns about runoff, so similar to yours, Brian, and then any oil, gas, etc., that may be stored within the building, and it being increased given the slope, again, towards the resource area. The second item was, is it possible to pivot the leaching field toward the 100-foot buffer zone a few degrees to make room for the garage to be located closer to the current driveway, rotating at 90 degrees? Not sure about the ability to drive over a leaching field, but it looks like the current design that would happen anyway. Or can the design of the garage change to be more narrow but deeper, so tandem parking, to fit in the space and be located further away from the 100-foot buffer? And those are her questions and concerns.
I would ask Greg, if possible, would you mind addressing some of those questions that Jillian had?
Sure. I'll do the best I can for you. Again, Greg Roy, Dillson Roy Civil Design Group. I'm representing Mitch Dutcher. He's also on the call this evening as well. Appreciate the time this evening. And yeah, Brian, I appreciate your summary of the site walk. I was also on site with the members that could make it, and that's the way I remember it as well. So to address runoff, I think the first comment there that that was read, I think there's two different things, maybe. Runoff from the, runoff from the roof is one thing, right? And then, the potential for hazardous spills. I don't necessarily see it as a runoff condition because it would be inside the structure, contained in a, on the concrete floor, within the concrete walls of the building. So I'm not sure I can really comment on that potential. But runoff from the roof, we are certainly willing to do some mitigation there, particularly along the back of the roof structure, perhaps doing some drip line infiltration. We have the advantage on this site. It's fairly sandy soil, so it does. There is a pretty good infiltration. The soil has good infiltration characteristics, so we could definitely do some drip line recharge right along the back side of the building. Yep, thank you. If that would help, I would think that would mitigate pretty much all of the runoff concerns in this case because of because of the sandy soil characteristics of the property. So I think we could, pretty much match the existing runoff characteristics that exist today with the, as Brian indicated, with the lawn area that exists today.
Right.
In terms of reorientating the structure, the applicant has actually already gone to the Zoning Board of Appeals to get a zoning variance for this. So the setbacks, I think, to the property lines are actually 20 feet. So he's actually tried to tuck this as far up into the corner as he can. There's a sense of this that, we have to fit of course, fit the leaching field in there. We have to construct a driveway to the front of this structure, to the garage bays. So rotating it, I think 90 degrees along the opposite property line, I think would result in actually more impervious area, just because we'd have to, really radically change the way we're coming in. We'd have to now do a big sweeping loop and have a big, probably 35 or 40-foot apron in front of the garage door bays to really be able to maneuver a vehicle in there at a 90-degree angle now, or even more as you come in around there. So I think you would end up with more impervious area on the site if you were to do that. I think that this is really the most efficient way to position this on the property. And again, given that it's not like it's not like we're asking the commission to clear a section of undisturbed buffer zone here, where we've placed the closest point of the structure 75 feet away from the 75 feet away from the wetlands in an area that's already maintained lawn. And I think that if the commission was amenable to it, we could overcome concerns with runoff by installing some drainage appurtenances such as a drip line infiltration system, which would mitigate and match existing runoff patterns, so that you'd see no additional runoff off the site. As Brian said, there's a good demarcation here built in with the stone wall. So unlike other cases where you could experience some, I'll call it scope creep over time. A lot of these situations where we permit things like this with the commission, we'll be looking at permanent demarcation, for example, where we show not only the current owner, but I think the concern is mostly for future owners, where that limit of work needs to be. In this case, we really have one already defined on the site, so it, with the stone wall. So I think, given those factors, that's why we put it where we did. That's why we dared come before you, I guess, given all those factors. So we are willing to modify the plan to put in that drainage if that's something that the commission is amenable to.
Other commission members have initial comments, questions, thoughts? Seeing any. Rebecca, do you have any initial comments, questions and or thoughts concerning this project?
Sure. I relayed items on site. I agree with Brian, you and Greg's comments about what is existing today on the property. There are some, you could perceive them to be temporary structures that were not permitted by the commission that are on site that are within jurisdictional area. And I bring that up to say, I understand that this barn and that you did come before the commission for the shop and barn, which is great that you're required to do, and that you've worked the site to the best of your ability to shift it into an area that seems to be meeting a lot of those performance standards. Now, what I said on site was that the jurisdiction and the regulatory authority of the Conservation Commission is to minimize, mitigate, or basically deter from alteration. And so my only comments would be, and we're on site, how do we shift things further outside of the jurisdictional area? And basically can the applicant achieve a similar goal or the same goal with something that's on site already, or with something similar, but maybe not to the same square footage? So that's what I look at when I look at these sites. Yes, it's a significantly maintained area. When we're out on site, we talked about how it's been hayfield for a long time before this house was built. There's a stone wall along the perimeter, which I agree really keeps people from having further encroachment or any creep into or towards the wetland. But that's my concern too, is setting a precedent. But again, Brian brought up the point of he sees it as alteration over existing lawn, which is something that is allowed in the local bylaw and the regulations. So just making sure that we can propose conditions that will ensure that this structure will accommodate that and just be in compliance with our performance standards.
Okay. All right. Excuse me. All right. So all that said, Greg, if we were to ask you to add in some language, basically relating to basically a drip line or some way to mitigate the runoff from the actual structure. Rebecca, if we were to add some language, if Rebecca was going to kind of try to put together our boilerplate conditions based off what's already been submitted, usually we'll mention stockpiling for the project outside the buffer zone, wherever practicable. Same with machinery used for the project should remain outside the buffer zone whenever practicable and should not be left overnight within the buffer zone, should be removed from it at the end of the day's work.
Yeah, we'd have no problems with those conditions. Mr.
Okay.
Chair. Yeah, no problem.
All
at all.
right, so in that case, would you be comfortable if we continued to our next meeting, give Rebecca a chance to write all of these in, and also to email Jillian, let her know what we discussed, make sure she's comfortable with everything as well, and then hopefully be able to issue them at our next meeting.
Yeah, if the commission's looking to feels like they need more time to get a draft order, it doesn't sound like we're gonna have that ready to go tonight anyway. So seems like we'd be, we're not maybe adding in much time here. So is that what I'm hearing you say, that you'd more or less draft an order of conditions? Okay.
I think so. I was gonna say, I should ask other commission members on site comfortable with that.
I'm just wondering, is there any maintenance with that drip line?
We can suggest an O&M for that, Lori, no problem.
Okay.
Yep. If you were to continue it 2 weeks, it'll give us time to revise the plan, so you don't have to wonder what it's gonna look like. So we could add that on the plan. We could give you some, we could give you some language for O&M on that.
Brian, the property owner has their hand
Okay.
raised.
I see a question. Yeah, if you could unmute him, please.
Trying to.
I think, am I unmuted now?
Yes.
I think so, yes.
Yeah, so just on the, I have no issues, like I said, doing any sort of drip line or drainage in order to get the garage in. As far as shrinking it, where you see where the 100-foot buffer goes through the garage, that's essentially at 20 feet from the end of the garage. So, you'd have to shrink the garage to essentially 20 feet by 32. You really couldn't go, that's the largest I'd be able to make it if it was to stay right on the buffer line, because, as Greg said, the leaching field can't shift from where it is, and you have to be a certain distance from that as well. Like I said, this is literally the only place I could put the garage is that, like I said, I've tried to purchase land from, surrounding neighbors, and, for one reason or another, like I said, wasn't able to acquire any. But I have no issues, like I said, putting in the drainage. And even if it requires some maintenance, I have no issue doing that, as long as, like I said, the end goal is to get the garage for the business, and that's it.
Yeah, and I think the people that were on the site, I think you can attest to the fact that Mitch prides himself in a nice looking piece of property. So a lot of times when you have those drainage features that go unmaintained, that they end up looking like an eyesore. And that's not really the way Mitch rolls on the site. He really prides himself in keeping the property well maintained. So, like I said, we can, if the commission wants to take 2 weeks to prepare a draft order conditions, I think that would be a win-win, because we can give you a plan that shows the details, location and details for that drainage drip infiltration area, and give you some suggested conditions, perhaps, if you'd like to take them for operation and maintenance on there, that could be put into to the order. So that's something we can easily do in the next few days or a week. So
That would be excellent. Rebecca, did you do February 7th, our next meeting?
Yep.
As far as
I would say 7:45.
7:45? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I will not be available I'm going to be out of town that week, but I will definitely have someone there. So, and we
Okay.
will have the plans to you in advance of that meeting. So.
Yep. Plans for that meeting or any narratives or additional information will need to be submitted by noon the Thursday prior. So as long as we have that, it'll be incorporated into any draft conditions and anything that the commission discusses next meeting.
Okay.
And
Fair
I'll ask commission members, Rebecca, when you have a chance, when they are basically drafted, if you could send them around like you normally do. But if anybody has any questions, knowing Greg might not be at our next meeting, or probably won't be at our next meeting, if you could email Rebecca with any questions or anything you're not clear on, basically.
Sure. No problem.
That'd be
All right.
great, Brian. Thank you.
Excellent. All right. In that case, I would like to make a motion. So pull up my notes. I'd like to make a motion that we continue the public hearing for 19 Whitcomb Road until our next public meeting, Tuesday, February 7th at 7:45 p.m. Do I hear a second for continuing?
Second.
I
All
second.
right. All those in favor, starting with Lori,
Sake. Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Jim,
Aye.
and Rebecca. I'm an aye as well.
Thanks, everybody. We appreciate it.
All right. Take
Thank
care.
you
Greg.
as well.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. Rebecca, are you ready to continue?
Yes.
All right. Time wise, we're perfect, right? Yeah. So the Bolton Conservation Commission will now continue the public hearing under Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, and the Bolton Bylaw, Chapter 233, to consider a notice of intent for South Bolton Road Map 2.C Parcel 16, DEP file number 112-0720. Rebecca, could you give us a quick update on where we stand with this particular project?
Sure. So we've already gone out, or a few members at least have gone out and conducted a site visit. At the site visit, there was an odd line of snow fencing and conservation boundary markers that we came upon. In addition to that, at the last meeting, the applicant provided a summary of the project, and we also requested any further review or any further comments from the MISA review process and the MIPA review process. And so before this meeting, I had reached out to Brian from Haley Ward, who's on the call as well, representative of the applicant, to see any follow-up associated with that. So Brian, if you would like, I can hand it over to Brian.
That would be excellent if you would be so kind.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. Brian Melissa with Haley Ward here representing the applicant. I believe he's supposed to be on the phone. Maybe he's
Yep,
at.
I'm here, Brian.
Okay, there you are. Who's Dan Martha? Yeah, so the update I have is I really don't have an update. The applicant has hired a MIPA expert. While we were putting the plan set together, meeting preliminarily with the planning board, we met extensively with MISA. They have filed their package with Natural Heritage, and MISA has reviewed it. We've incorporated all their comments to date in the plan set that was actually submitted to this commission. And now they just have to finish the MIPA process. There's an ENF process because of the take and the amount of take. So they have hired a MIPA expert, and I don't have an update as to when that decision is going to be made. Typically, and I will say typically, there is a site walk conducted. The locals, which would be you guys, are invited to that, or at least notified of that site walk. And I don't believe we've had that notification yet. So the quick answer is I don't have an answer for you.
It'll be just the estimate from I hired Durand and Anastas. They said they would be applying to either the March 1 or March 15th review, which is then 30 days? 30 days or 40 days, or a 30 and a 10, I think. So a total of 40 days from that date for anyone to come forward.
So that would mean then, just timing this out, that would mean you wouldn't have an answer from them until spring at least.
Yep, April at the earliest.
Okay.
And that would basically prevent you from doing work on the property until you have an answer from them?
Yep.
If you look at the letter that you do have from MISA.
Yeah.
And I believe they have two sections. They cover the Wetlands Protection Act, and then they cover the Endangered Species Act. But the little blurb at the very end of that letter does say that no earth disturbing activities can be undertaken for the project until these permits have been issued. So,
all right. So would it make sense for us to continue until said time, until we can hear back from them, and possibly go with them on their site walk as well? And that way we should be, I mean, in theory, we've asked most of our questions. We should be able to draft orders relatively quickly at the same point in time that they're kind of getting their orders together, I would imagine.
I guess I would just, for the sake of my client, ask, is this typically what the commission would do in these kind of matters? A lot of times, and I'm not the MIPA expert, I'll be the first one to raise my hand and tell you that. But we always like to get local approval when going up in front of MIPA. We do understand and would welcome a condition to say that if there was any wholesale changes or any changes whatsoever, we would have to come back in front of you. But I pose that to the commission as a question. A lot of times the applicants are trying to move on with financing and things like that, and every little hurdle they can get over, there's a little feather in their cap, and we can kind of move things on. However, if it's something that the commission does feel strongly about, then we certainly do want to work with you.
I think, and I'll ask Rebecca, but I think in the past, usually we have waited, generally speaking.
Yeah, and in addition to that, any comments, although the Conservation Commission is never required to include their comments or conditions in the order of conditions, a lot of times it is really helpful because it either better defines and character or better defines the language used in the conditions of the commission to make sure that they're incorporating those concerns, or if there's any revisions, it makes the process a little more straightforward, even though slightly longer, to your point, for the applicant, because then we're able to just tie it in right away instead of going back, having to go through either a new notice of intent filing process with associated filing fees, or going through an amendment process, and how that can be a little choppy as well. So that's why the commission typically likes to hold it. But so that would be my suggestion to the commission, but again, it's at their discretion. And I'm comfortable with whichever they choose.
I'll put it out to other commission members. Again, normally I would say, but we'll wait till we get their comments. I think it makes everything a little easier, but I can understand why the applicant's asking for us to try to develop something quicker. Other commission members have thoughts, feelings?
I certainly don't want to interrupt, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead,
But just to kind of add another layer to it, during the conversations we had with MISA, they asked us to flop the detention basin or the stormwater basin into the position that it's currently on the plan. They asked us to provide that a 50-foot no-cut zone along the, and I know I'm going to screw this up, but I believe it's the southern border, their southerly border. I think when we saw the shooting range, Rebecca, and at the planning board stage, they asked that 50-foot no touch kind of be incorporated into the open space that we did. So it wasn't just that we had a couple of comments from me, so we kind of worked with them extensively. And again, I know I'm just trying to go to bat here and trying to see if we can get a process closed. But we did work, we worked with them quite a bit to try to get to this plan stage that we have in front of you guys now.
The other note is, and I appreciate all that, and sorry, Brian, our chair, Brian, to jump
you're
in.
fine, please. No, go
But
ahead.
the other aspect was related to the open space or conservation restriction, right? And that's something that internally we're discussing. That would be helpful for the commission to be able to incorporate into their conditions, just establishing that basically the vehicle that is going to go through in the conditions. So I think, not to say that's sort of a silver lining to having your applicant wait or have, being patient, not that you haven't been with the commission, but that's another aspect of it that we haven't ironed out yet. That I think if we're at least down to what vehicle to use, that can be incorporated into a condition as part of the order. And I think that's reasonable on top of waiting for the MIPA review.
Point taken.
All right. So that said, would you be fine with us continuing at this point?
We would have been fine anyways. Yeah, we just wanted to kind of
I know.
have the conversation with the commission.
It's worth asking. Yeah. All right. So, Rebecca, our next meeting is February 7th. Is it something you want to keep on, and we can just have the applicant email and say we don't have the info yet, and we just keep continuing it until?
I think that's the best method, because then nothing gets lost. And then if they do get the information, then they are already plugged into the agenda. And administratively, although there's a lot of redundancy for both myself and the applicant's representative, it makes it much more clean for when we finally do issue. And just noting, sorry, Dan, noting this meeting that was the reason why it's being continued, then it won't be when it's issued. It will also be noted in that whatever document is issued, that this was the reason for the multiple continuations. It wasn't that they were not providing information. It's that we were waiting for information. Yep.
Okay. All right. So in that case, I'd like to make a motion. Hold on 1 second. All right, so I'd like to make a motion that we continue the public hearing for South Bolton Road map 2.c parcel 16 DEP file number 112-0720 until our next public hearing, Tuesday, February 7th at 8:00 PM. Do I hear a second for continuing?
Second.
All right, all those in favor, starting with Lori,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Jim,
Aye.
and Rebecca, I am an aye as well.
Great, thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
All right.
Thank you as well.
And like I
Thank you.
say, as I end all these meetings, Rebecca, if any questions, please let us know. Try to get the information as soon as we can. And any update, if you will, on that vehicle, we can pass it along to the applicant's attorney, who's kind of waiting, chomping at a bit to try to figure out how he's going to write these restrictions up and whatnot. So
Sure, I will definitely
Yep.
do that. Thank you, Brian.
Is that
Yeah.
is that being done in conjunction with the planning board?
So yes, you are correct to say that the ultimate decision, in a sense, is the planning board that establishes that. We will also tie in whatever vehicle it is to our order of conditions, echoing what the planning board says. But there's some internal discussion that has to occur between departments, not necessarily with the commission yet, to establish with, for instance, we typically discuss any sort of acquisition, land donation, or restriction with the town administrator, the planner, who also staffs the ZBA, sometimes the building department. So there's a couple people that need to continue the discussion to make sure that that's the best. And then it comes back to the commission to say, if they're the ones holding it, to say, yes, if it gets accepted, then we will hold it. And then the planning board will reference that, okay, the Conservation Commission will either hold the CR or hold the land for the town. Does that make sense, Dan?
Yep, absolutely. Thank you.
great.
All right,
You guys have a
Good night.
great rest of the night.
thank you. Rebecca. Next up is a request for a COC.
Yes.
Are you prepared? Good place to give us an update on the Woods at Farm Road and their particular request?
Yes, I am just pulling up the plans. We do have the property manager present as well, Austin DeSantis. He had, or Seth Donahoe was their engineer, or is their engineer, who submitted the request on behalf of the applicant. I have been out to the site with Seth, and this is the as-built that's displayed here. And I'll talk about it in a moment. And essentially, we're out on site. There were only a couple items that, and those were the comments I'd forwarded to the commission. It was really 7 items that were something that brought my attention and that were observed on site. Nothing I found that was substantially in non-compliance at this time, but one of those items, for instance, was the plantings and then some of the seeding. A lot of the seed had, now obviously you can't see it because of the snow cover, but it was relatively stabilized as far as over the septic area and then over the other proposed lawn areas. The area that is probably my biggest concern or focus, again, aside from the septic area along the toe of the septic, there was a little bit of sediment there, but not anything that would compromise the function of the silt fence that's existing. So it was just a note to say that needs to be removed before the silt fence is removed. Then the area typically come springtime, even though it may be meeting that 75% cover right now for stabilization, it would be helpful to oversee that area. I'm just gonna see who's not muted. Okay, I'm just hearing an echo, sorry. Then there is a there was a post, a wooden post in the field. The property manager had suggested that that was a control point during the project, and that can be removed. So that was just another note that I had highlighted and provided comment about. This area, which I will try to highlight, is the area that differed from the original proposed plans, which you can see slightly here. Oh, I can't zoom in more, I apologize. So next to unit 1, there is an area that is a planting area. Some of those plantings, the root balls exposed on them, so I would be surprised if they could all survive until spring, but I think there might be some replacement necessary. So just planting monitoring, which is typically something that the commission sees. It has to go through 2 growing seasons at a 75% success rate, or those items need to be replaced. So again, nothing out of the ordinary, but something we typically see. The other item is these boulders here that highlight as built boulders. That is actually replacing a geotextile fabric that was originally proposed. The as-built boulders are more of a small retaining wall to replace that geotextile fabric. I didn't have a significant issue with that on site. I think it still provides the same function and purpose as to what the geotextile fabric had. It has a different aesthetic look, obviously, but it's not a large retaining wall. The purpose, though, of those boulders, as the commission, I'm sure, recalls, was actually to define the limit of work and limit of maintenance area while allowing for emergency access. So if you look under, you see the darker as-built boulders here. But then if you look under, there's a lighter version, which was the original, and that's boulders that are actually sitting on top of the lawn area there, and then having one that is spaced enough for access for emergency access, not necessarily emergency vehicles. And that met the emergency standards that were necessary under their requirements. So that was the only thing that was on site that was not there and was part of something that was in the commission's jurisdiction. And then in addition, was required in a very specific requirement for that, establishing and memorializing that limit of work, particularly adjacent to the wetland, which is here. So Brian, at that point, I don't know if you'd like the property manager to weigh in at all, or if you have any questions or comments.
Sorry, if Austin's comfortable weighing in, just to get his thoughts on why the changes were made, or any other comments, I think that'd be great, and then I'll open it up to commission members.
Okay. Hi, how's it going?
Good.
We were looking for 2 things in this meeting. We agree with Rebecca. There's some seeding that does need to be done along that slope of that last unit there. We're gonna have to bring the dirt once spring rolls around. We get some snow melt, and we'll overseed that with the wild mix that's required, as well as replace any bushes that need to be replaced. We're looking for a partial release on specifically those 2 end units because they're both sold. And the other thing we're looking for is to have the option of placing a split rail fence along the definition of, or the limit of lawn, I guess I would say, rather than putting boulders up, so we didn't have to drive machinery across the lawn. But that would be up to you.
All right. So I'll open it up to commission members, but I was going to ask the question of Rebecca, is this something we could do a partial COC, minus the plantings? So I think you said you were amenable to that. That kind of answers that question. I personally would be fine if you switch to a split rail fence in this instance. And I'm comfortable with the other changes that were made that are showing on the as-built. But I will open it up to other commission members' thoughts, comments, questions. Okay. Not hearing any. So that said, Rebecca, if we were to issue a partial COC, I'm just trying to think the language I would need that would be issuing it a partial certificate of compliance, not including the plantings. How,
Yeah, I think you're approaching it correctly, Brian.
all right. And not inclusive of plantings. And then as far as basically the field amendments we're kind of agreeing to tonight, is that basically covered under the discussion, the public discussion this evening?
Yep, so just to be clear, you are amenable to boulders or the split rail fence that the property manager is proposing.
Correct, unless any
Okay.
commission members have an issue with that.
And I would suggest that those be survey located just to make sure they're in the right spot. I can certainly do a site visit once it's installed. And what I would suggest, Brian, as well is, so if you're issuing the partial COC, not to include the plantings.
Yep.
I would leave out, so not including or not considering final stabilization at this time, because that basically essentially allows them to do the seeding, to do the plantings as well.
Yeah.
And then noting obviously that the split rail fence or boulder.
Be installed. Okay, so in that case, I'd like to make a motion that we issue, sorry, hold on one second. DEP file number, that we issue a partial certificate of compliance for the Woods at Farm Road, excluding conditions regarding the plantings or final stabilization. Do I hear a second for issuing that partial COC?
Second.
All right, all those in favor, starting with Lori,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Jim,
Aye.
and Rebecca, I am an aye as well.
Okay, thank you. So Austin, that document, once we receive all signatures from the Conservation Commission, that's at the point in which it will be issued, the mailing date, or if you're looking to come and pick up in person, that date would be the issuance date. So whether it's mailing preferred or hand pickup, and that document needs to be recorded at the Registry of Deeds. And then at that time, it's established as the partial has been issued and final. And then once you complete the other work, please provide an update and then come back for the full certificate of compliance when you're ready.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You as well.
All right. Rebecca, you ready to proceed? Yes. All right. If I'm correct, next up, we have our vote scheduled for notice of intent for DEP file number 112-0719 for 580 Main Street.
Correct.
If I am correct, we have already closed this hearing, so no additional public comment or question this evening. Rebecca has sent around the draft order of conditions. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to read through that. And we are simply voting on whether to issue the order of conditions as drafted and submitted at this evening's meeting. Do I have all of that correct?
That is correct. I did have a couple, or at least two conditions that I just wanted to review specifically with the commission, but if there were any other that the commission wanted to add in or remove, I'm certainly open to that as well. So I will share my screen in a moment.
Please.
So the first was, there was a condition, so these are boilerplate, and then others are taken from the discussions during the public hearing process, and then others are taken from relevant projects that the commission has already issued on and some of those conditions that may be relevant, obviously I pull those. So one condition I had a question on was monitoring of the BVW and perennial stream water levels on the property during and post construction. This is typically something that is actually required or requested through a NIPD's permit. So that is a process that they'll be continuing with, to my understanding. So it's not necessarily required that the commission has this, but that's, again, we do have a general condition in here that is referencing that any additional information that the commission needs, they can request. So it is covered under that general as well, but that was just one that I can keep in or remove, but I wasn't sure what the commission felt about. And that's the highlighted verbiage here.
I'm comfortable either way. I mean, if we have it covered somewhere else, I can see taking it out. I don't think it would hurt us to leave it in, but I if I could see taking it out, if it just simplifies things.
I think,
Go ahead. I was going to say, I'd love your thoughts, or if any commission members have strong feelings.
I'm interested to hear what the commission members think, but again, it is covered in a sense under another condition that's written a little bit more general, a provision that allows for the commission to request for additional information, which could be something like this. So that's just my insight on it, but I didn't know if Jim, Lori, or Bill, you had any other thoughts or insights on that particular item.
Yeah, no, I'm okay removing it if it's listed somewhere else.
Okay.
Okay.
So we'll do that.
Right. And you had
Um,
one other section, right?
Yes. So the other is specific to the 1.5 times the estimate for all work. This is for, it's basically holding it in escrow so that if the work's completed, the town returns that to the applicant once they complete that particular portion of it. But this just allows for if something goes wrong, it allows security for the town so that they can go in and complete that work.
Yeah.
The planning board or zoning board of appeal, I think it's the planning board, they typically ask for something similar, but it's items related to their jurisdiction, and where this site has quite a bit of resource areas on it and work within it, even though much of it is redevelopment. I think this is relevant, and where the commission established that they don't use it on single family lots anymore, but they do for developments or larger commercial properties. That's why I put it in the draft. Again, I understand either way, but that was just one of the items that we don't have in every order, but there's a reason for that because of what the commission has established in the past.
And this one, I'll put it out to the commission, but I would definitely keep this one in. And as you stated too, Rebecca, this is historically what we would do for any larger commercial developments. And it is useful for us to have that money. We actually have needed to use it on certain projects. But other commission members have strong thoughts and or feelings.
I think you should keep it in.
Yeah, agreed.
All right, and I'll put it out there to the commission members now. Anything else you'd like to see added or changed from this draft? All right. In that case, I'd like to make a motion that we issue the order of conditions for 580 Main Street, DEP file number 112-0719 as submitted and amended at this evening's meeting. Do I hear a second for issuing?
Second.
Second.
All right. All those in favor, starting with Lori,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Jim,
Aye.
and Rebecca, I am an aye as well.
Wonderful, thank you. I believe Phil is on the call. So Phil, just as I repeated to the other individuals about issuance, so once we receive all the signatures, this document will be issued. You can let me know whether you would like it mailed to a specific address, so your preferred address would be helpful to know, or if you'd like to stop by the office to pick it up, whichever that may be, that will be the issuance date. And then it will have to be recorded at the Registry of Deeds, and then you and I can connect on any pre-construction items that need to be addressed there prior to any start of work. There is a 10-day appeal period, so that obviously comes after the issuance and before the start of work. Do you have any questions about issuance at this time?
No, I'm good. That sounds good, Rebecca. Happy to coordinate. We'll figure out the details on it. It sounds
Okay.
good. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Phil.
Okay, thank you for commission members. Happy to work with you. I'm sure we'll be seeing each other again. We're not done. We have a long way to go here.
I was
So,
gonna
thank-
say, I'm sure we will. All right, Phil, take care. Good luck.
Take care. Thanks.
All right. Did commission members have a chance to look through our meeting minutes from December 6th and January 10th? And if so, any edits, changes, comments, and if not, anybody need more time to read through them?
We don't have a quorum
I-
of
Yep.
individuals from that. So
From either one of them. So we'll probably table these until our next meeting. Sorry about that. But now I get to read through them again, so that's something to look forward to. I did not have any amendments or edits, but I will take another look before our next meeting. So that said, update us on enforcement orders.
Sure. So 100 East End Road and 3 John Powers Lane are simply placeholders for now as we await springtime, where they have to do just some final work or final observation that what they have done has taken. 175 Fox Run Road, this was an item that is in compliance aside from the final memorialization of the conservation restriction, which also falls in line with the outer extent of the 200-foot riverfront area. They did respond back and say that they have a row of shrubs planted 6 to 8 feet on center across the conservation restriction boundary on site. They sent me an image that does show there are in place. They said that they'd be happy to plant more if it's too sparse or replace any that don't survive. But just that's what the commission was waiting for, was what they were using for that. So any insights the commission may have on that would be helpful. Otherwise, if you're comfortable with the shrubs 6 to 8 feet on center along that line, I can certainly just issue a letter stating that the enforcement is lifted if that's something the commission wants to establish this evening.
I mean, I think I'm comfortable with it. I'd like to get your thoughts, Rebecca, if you thought it was sufficient and, you know, an honest attempt at what we were trying to accomplish there. But if you think so, I'm comfortable with the work they've done so far.
Yeah, I thought it was. They also do have some stakes in place currently, which they said they're happy to leave until the shrubs are further established. And I think that's certainly helpful, just to make sure that any landscapers that are coming in see that that's not something that should be removed.
Yeah.
Because right now they are quite young for shrubs, so they're small, which is, I think, fine, as long as they survive. So I'm comfortable with what that is as well. I think it meets what the commission was requiring of them.
So then, again, unless I'm seeing any objections, which I'm not, but please speak up, I would say, please go ahead and issue that letter, letting them know that we're comfortable with the basically the repair mitigation they've done.
Okay, I will do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you want me to run through the other updates?
I would love for you to.
Okay. So right now we've completed the initiation phase with the Mass Trails Bolton Trails Connectivity Improvement Project. So over basically from now until December 2024, we will be replacing crossings within 3 of the conservation properties or repairing them and bringing them up to a standard that allows for more user groups to get across them safely. That being said, that's that update. The upcoming trail walk that we have is January 31st at 10 a.m. at Welch Pond off of Wattaquatic Hill Road. I will be there to assist, but one of our Trails Committee members who actually created a summit series. So this year we'll be focusing on the various summits in Bolton for guided walks. The Bolton Conservation Trust has actually, or will be providing, I believe it's a hat for those who complete the summits in Bolton. And in addition to that, like I said, we are offering the guided hikes to feature one each month, so that almost each month rather, so that we can encourage people to actually start doing that little challenge. So they will actually be leading the walk on January 31st, but I'll be with them to support them and provide any other information during the walk. Then we have the volunteer land steward position is still open, and our open recreation plan subcommittee has their first meeting on the 26th. At that time, we'll establish who's on the committee. So it's a just startup meeting at this point. The next meeting will be posted to the town website so that others are aware of what is happening. And we will be starting to update the plan, which will be a fairly big undertaking, but I think it'll be reasonable compared to the large lift we did in 2017. I skipped an item purposefully because it may take a moment longer, or rather just maybe we'll start the discussion tonight, maybe invite Bolton Conservation Trust representatives to come in if that's necessary. We received a request from the Bolton Conservation Trust to hold their annual Tom Denny Nature Camp at Bower Springs. They did submit, which I forwarded to you, an email. They submitted where they would like to have their activities, and in addition to that, what activities to take place within the Bower Springs property. This is a camp that they've held there on an annual basis, and there's not much significant change. They're still requesting tents there, picnic tables. They sent the amount of each, porta potties, which they supply all of that during camp. Last year, the only issue, I guess, if you're going to call it that, was at the end of camp. Everyone left, and there was a statement made that the lost and found type material could stay on site there, and it seemed like there was just waste or leftover products. It wasn't so anyways, this year I had suggested to them at the end of when they do the cleanup to provide the date where they'll clean up by, so that we don't send DPW out to clean up their activity. But then also if they can establish that they have a lost and found, or coordinate further with me or the town, so that we don't have just random articles of clothing or equipment there, and one having it stolen by someone else, which wasn't an issue last year, or having it thrown away because someone thinks it's waste that's been left there. So that was really, I think, the only issue we ran into last year, which they've provided some clarification on regarding the dates they'll be cleaned up by. And I believe they're going to be doing the lost and found, but I'll double check with them on that.
I was insane. If they're amenable to some of those things that you had mentioned to them without major significant changes, I would normally say we approve it. We generally approve it every year. It's a perfect, I shouldn't say perfect. It's a great use of that land. It's great for educational purposes for the use of the town. It's generally used by the people of the town, that I'm comfortable allowing them to do it again. I don't know that we need to have them come back for any reason, but I will open that up to other members of the commission. Any comments, thoughts, or feelings regarding Tom Denny? Again, not seeing any that I would think they are fine to proceed.
Okay, can you maybe do a just
Roll
a
call
roll
vote.
call?
Sure.
Just so I can document it properly and relate to them
Sure.
that it's been okay.
Sure. In that case, I'd like to call, I'd like to basically call a vote that we approve of the Bolton Conservation Trust holding their annual Tom Denny Nature Camp at the Bolton Springs Conservation Area. All those in favor, please say aye, and we'll start with Lori.
I just say, leave no footprint.
There you go.
Yeah.
If we could remind him of that as well, Rebecca. Bill,
Aye.
Jim,
Aye.
and Rebecca, I'm an aye as well.
Great. Okay, wonderful. Thank you. And I think that's all we have. I will note very quickly about Bowers as well, and I did relay it to the Bolton Conservation Trust. We did get an estimate. It's included. We've explained this before in the past about the budget, but part of that is making sure that Bowers stays open, particularly the trails around the pond where we're seeing erosion take place. So there will be a project over the next 2 years, I would think, so that we can phase it for removal of woody vegetation along the earthen dams, allowing the herbaceous to stay, which is what it primarily is in those areas, and then adding some material to further grade to where the earthen dams need to be. And that's based upon a report we had carried out by GZA, who went out and assessed them. So I'm just noting that as that's something that the Conservation Trust was aware of, that we wouldn't be planning it for camp, but potentially next year we'll try and work with their schedule, but that's just something to be cognizant of that may be going on at that time.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
And with that, I have nothing else.
Okay. Any commission members have any new business? And again, thank you to, thank you to Jim, but thank you also to Lori and Bill for being able to jump on tonight and making sure we had a quorum. Rebecca, as always, thank you for your wonderful work. And all that said, I'd like to make a motion that we officially adjourn the Tuesday, January 24th, 2023 meeting of the Bolton Conservation Commission. Do I hear a second for adjourning?
Second.
All those in favor, starting with Lori,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Jim,
Aye.
and Rebecca, thank you. Rebecca, I am an aye as well, and thank you.
Thank you as well. Thank you for your work, Brian,
All
too.
right, I appreciate that. All right,